All right, so today we're going to be diving into something that I think is super interesting. Owning property in Thailand, especially for, us foreigners. And we've got this amazing source from Ocean Worldwide, this luxury real estate agency that's been operating out of Phuket. And that's Phuket, not, Phuket since 2004.
Yeah, they've got a ton of experience. I mean, they've helped thousands of people over the years really navigate this whole this market. So their insights are, I think, super valuable for anyone who's even thinking about, maybe dipping their toes in these waters.
Absolutely. And their director, Sandra O'Neill, she's been, leading the charge. They focus specifically on luxury residential real estate, not just in Phuket, but also in Koh Samui.
Yeah, and what's funny is Thailand, it gets this like reputation for having these like super complex property laws, especially for foreigners. But once you break it down, it's not as scary as it sounds.
Yeah, I was actually surprised by how much I learned just from this blog post. Like, for example, I always thought foreigners couldn't own any land in Thailand. But that's not totally true, right?
No, you're right. It's not entirely true. I mean, the key is really it's all about understanding the nuances. You've got to understand the details. So like, for example, we've got the Condominium Act,
Okay.
which actually allows foreigners to own condo units, but there's this cap, this 49% cap on foreign ownership in any building.
Okay, so it's like you can own a piece of paradise, right, in like a bustling Phuket condo,
Huh.
but the majority ownership always has to stay in Thai hands. What's the reasoning behind that? Why is that the case?
So Thailand really prioritizes keeping land ownership in the hands of its citizens. It's part of their approach to managing their economy and their resources.
Right, it's about protecting their national interests and ensuring that the land remains accessible to Thai people.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
Now, when it comes to actual land ownership, that's where the Land Code Act kicks in, and this is where it gets a bit more restrictive. Foreigners generally can't directly own land.
Okay, but I know from the article there's some workarounds. Like what if somebody's thinking long term or they want something more than just a condo?
Yeah, there are definitely some options. So you've got leaseholds, which are very popular. Basically, you're renting the land for a set period, often up to 30 years, and there's often the possibility of extending that.
Oh, okay. So you could potentially secure a really long-term presence in Thailand, even if you don't technically own the land underneath. What are some of the other options?
You also have usufructs. This gives you the right to use and enjoy someone else's property, often for your lifetime.
Interesting.
Like, imagine you want to build, let's say, a retirement home in Thailand. You don't want the hassle of land ownership. A usufruct could be perfect.
That's a great example. So you get the benefits of ownership, like, building and living in your dream home, but you bypass the complexities of the actual land ownership itself. I also read about these things called superficies.
Ah, superficies. Those are cool. This lets you own the buildings on a plot of land, even though you don't actually own the land underneath.
So let's say, like, you want to build a villa on this amazing piece of property overlooking the ocean. A superficies agreement would let you do that.
Exactly. And it's usually for a similar term as a leasehold.
Okay, so we've got leaseholds, we've got usufructs, we've got superficies, and then there was this other option in the article, something about companies. Can you explain that one a little bit?
Right. So setting up a Thai company, that's another route some people take. You'd own a minority share, up to 49%, and the Thai nationals hold the majority. And that way, this company, because it's got majority Thai ownership, it can actually legally buy the land.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of like an indirect way to own property through this company structure that complies with Thai law. I feel like there's a lot of strategic thinking involved here. Like, how do you choose the right path?
It depends entirely on your goals. What are you trying to achieve? How do you envision your presence in Thailand?
So what if someone really wants to own the land, like outright, no workarounds? Is that even a possibility?
It is possible, but it is not easy. It comes with some pretty big requirements. Like for starters, you need a minimum investment of 40 million baht.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Where does that money actually go?
So you can either put it into Thai government bonds, or you can invest in projects that are approved by the Board of Investment, the BOI. These are projects that are considered crucial for, Thailand's economic development.
So it's not just about the money itself. It's about like directing those funds in a way that aligns with Thailand's like broader economic goals.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, so you've made the investment. What happens next?
Then, the fun part, You have to get approval from the Ministry of Interior. And it's a serious process. They really look at your application to make sure it meets all the requirements.
Right. So they're really trying to make sure this type of investment is beneficial for Thailand as a whole.
Mm.
Are there any other restrictions that come with land ownership for foreigners?
Even if you get that approval, there are still limitations, like on how much land you can own, especially if it's for something like industrial or agricultural use. It's not a common path, especially for like individual buyers. It's more for those big-time investors.
Okay, so the takeaway is, while it is possible to own land directly, it's not the easiest route.
Huh.
It sounds like there are more accessible options out there, especially if you're looking at condos,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe those alternative structures we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. And the great thing about Thailand is it really does offer something for everyone. Whether you dream of a condo, overlooking the ocean in Phuket,
Mhm.
or you're looking for a long-term investment through a leasehold, maybe a usufruct, Thailand's got it.
And just to remind our listeners, we're getting all these insights from Ocean Worldwide, this agency with all the experience in the market.
Right. And they specialize in that luxury residential market. So they really know their stuff.
All right, so we've talked about the legal side of things. What about like the practical realities? What are some of the myths, the misconceptions that people have about owning property in Thailand?
Oh, there are a lot of those. One of the biggest ones is that prices are just completely out of control, like skyrocketing because of foreign demand.
Yeah, because Thailand's, it's such a desirable place. It seems like everyone wants a piece of it.
Ooh, right. But this is where the government actually plays a role. They really work to stabilize that market. They want to prevent those crazy price swings that you see in other popular places.
Oh, interesting. So it's a more like regulated and predictable market than most people think.
Absolutely. Another big misconception is that you absolutely have to have a Thai partner to own anything.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that one. Like you need a Thai spouse or a Thai business partner, to be able to figure things out.
That's simply not true. While partnering with a Thai national might sometimes make things easier, there are plenty of legal options that don't require that.
Gotcha. So it's about choosing the right path that fits your specific goals.
Exactly.
And that's where a resource like Ocean Worldwide comes in handy, right?
Exactly.
They can help you kind of weigh those options and figure out the best strategy.
Speaking of strategy, let's talk about something else, inheritance.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's something any property owner should consider, but it gets a little, well, more interesting in Thailand.
Right, because we have these unique ownership restrictions for foreigners.
Mm.
So I'm curious, how does that whole inheritance thing play into all of this?
So the Land Code Act, it says a foreigner can inherit land, but, and there's always a but with Thai property law.
I think I know what's coming.
They still have to get approval from the Minister of Interior.
Okay, so even if they inherit it, they still have to go through that whole approval process we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And it's not even always a guaranteed approval because the law mostly focuses on ownership through these specific treaties, which are kind of rare these days.
Oh, okay. So inheriting land based on one of those old treaties isn't a common thing anymore.
Not really. It's more of a historical thing now. Let's say, for example, you have a foreigner who's married to a Thai national.
Yeah.
And they inherit land from their spouse. You'd think that would make it easier,
Yeah,
right?
it seemed that way.
Not necessarily. They can inherit it, but they can't actually register it under their name.
Hold on. They inherit it, but they can't own it. What happens then?
They are required to sell it within a year. So for a foreigner inheriting land, it's more of a temporary situation, not a long-term ownership opportunity.
It's more about managing the transition of that property.
Right.
And that whole ministerial approval thing, that still comes into play, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's a key element even when we're talking about inheritance. It really underscores how important it is to understand these laws before you make any decisions about property in Thailand.
Especially if you're thinking about the long term, right?
Right.
And how you want to manage your assets. Now, what about property rights within a marriage between a foreigner and a Thai national?
This is where those restrictions on foreign land ownership create some interesting dynamics.
Okay.
Remember, foreigners can't own land directly, but Thai citizens, they always keep their right to own property.
Right. That makes sense. So the Thai spouse's property rights aren't affected just because they're married to a foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that work in practice, especially if they're buying property together?
Well, the foreign spouse actually has to sign this declaration.
A declaration.
Yeah, it's like a legal document where they confirm that the money used to buy the land belongs to the Thai spouse.
Oh, okay. So it's basically a way of like legally establishing that the land is, like, the Thai spouse is separate property, not a joint asset.
Precisely. And that declaration makes sure that the land stays under Thai ownership, even if it's within a mixed marriage.
So it all comes back to that core principle of maintaining Thai land ownership.
Exactly.
And how's the property actually registered then?
It has to be registered only in the Thai spouse's name.
Okay.
And the foreign spouse, they give up any claim to the property through that declaration.
That's pretty interesting. So the law really creates a clear line there. But I guess it also helps prevent any potential for confusion down the line.
For sure, it streamlines the process, avoids disputes, and clarifies ownership right from the start.
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here. We've talked about the core principles, the different options for foreigners, even gotten into the complexities of, inheritance and marital property rights.
And we've busted some myths along the way, which is always good.
Always a plus. Like those ideas that, prices are totally out of control or you have to have a Thai partner to own anything.
Right, those are just a couple of the misconceptions that hopefully we've cleared up today.
Yeah, definitely a lot to think about. But what about the future? Could these laws change?
There's definitely been some buzz, especially since, the pandemic, about maybe loosening some of those foreign ownership restrictions.
Yeah, the pandemic really shook things up globally, so it makes sense that it would impact, like, real estate markets and policies all over the world.
Right. And one of the main things people are talking about is that foreign ownership quota in condos.
Right, which is capped at 49% right now. Are they thinking about increasing that?
There have been proposals, yeah, to raise it potentially up to 75%.
Wow,
That would be a pretty big deal.
that would be a huge change.
And it could open the market up to a lot more foreign investors. But of course, it's not a decision to be made lightly. There are lots of factors to consider.
It's all about striking that balance, right?
Right.
Between attracting that foreign investment, but also protecting Thai citizens and making sure the market stays healthy.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another area where there's been some talk of change, land lease terms.
Yeah, right now the maximum is 30 years, which can feel a little limiting if you're thinking long term.
Right. There have been discussions about potentially bumping that up to 99 years.
Wow, that's almost a century.
It would be. And it would make those long-term investments so much more attractive, especially for people who are looking for a more kind of secure and stable outlook.
So those two things, the condo quotas and the leasehold durations, those are the key things to keep an eye on in the coming years.
Yeah, those are the big ones. They could really shake things up in the Thai property market.
Definitely an exciting time to be following all of this.
Absolutely. But before we move on, I want to address another misconception I often hear. This one can really trip people up.
All right, let's hear it. What myth are we busting today?
The idea that buying property in Thailand is just like insanely complex and risky, like it's this minefield of legal jargon and you're bound to fall into a trap.
Yeah, I can see how people would think that, especially when the laws are different and there are these ownership restrictions. It can seem intimidating.
I get it, but it's really not the whole story. Most of the confusion comes from just not understanding the specifics, the specific laws for each type of property.
Right. So it's all about doing your research, making sure you're getting the right information from reliable sources.
Exactly. Like, for example, foreigners can't directly own land, but they can own condos, right?
Right.
As long as they stay within that 49% foreign ownership quota.
Yeah.
It's not about being shut out of the market entirely. It's about knowing the rules of the game.
And that's where, having a knowledgeable guide like Ocean Worldwide can make a world of difference. They can help you figure out which path makes the most sense for you and your goals.
Absolutely. And another myth we need to tackle, the one about property prices in Thailand being totally out of control because of all the foreign investment.
Oh, yeah. That one gets thrown around a lot. Like there's this image of all these wealthy foreigners coming in and driving up prices, making it unaffordable for everyone else.
Right. But remember, those government measures we talked about, those are designed to control those fluctuations and make sure the market is relatively stable.
So they're actively working to prevent those crazy price swings that you see in other global markets.
Exactly. It's about protecting the Thai economy and making sure that locals aren't pushed out of the market.
Right. It's about making sure everyone has a fair chance, regardless of their nationality or their financial status.
Absolutely. And finally, we need to retire that myth that you absolutely need a Thai partner to own any property in Thailand.
That's a persistent one, isn't it? It's like this idea that you can't navigate the system without a Thai spouse or a Thai business partner.
And it's simply not true. While having a Thai partner might make some things easier, it's not a legal requirement.
So foreigners have options, even if they don't have a Thai partner.
Definitely. Remember those alternative structures we discussed? Leaseholds, usufructs, superficies, setting up a Thai company. Those are all legitimate options.
And they allow foreigners to get into the market without needing to find a Thai partner.
Exactly. So the takeaway here is that while Thailand has its rules, it's not an impossible market for foreigners to navigate.
It's about doing your homework, seeking out expert advice, and understanding the system.
And don't forget, Thailand offers a whole spectrum of investment opportunities for foreigners, from those luxurious beachfront condos to beautiful, rural properties. It's a stunning country, and owning a piece of it is within reach if you're willing to put in the effort.
All right, well, this has been a truly fascinating exploration of Thai property ownership, especially for us foreigners. We've unpacked the laws, debunked some myths, and even looked at what the future might hold.
It's been a great conversation, but we're not done yet.
That's right. In the next part, we're going to delve even deeper into the economic rationale behind these unique laws and explore what might happen if Thailand were to completely open up land ownership to foreigners. Stay tuned, listeners, for the next installment of our deep dive.
It's interesting because what we've been talking about, it really highlights the economic logic behind these laws.
Oh, yeah, it's not just about trying to keep foreigners out. There's a bigger strategy at play.
Yeah, exactly. There is. Those restrictions on foreign land ownership, they really play a role in protecting Thailand's interests.
Right. It's about safeguarding those resources, making sure Thai citizens have access to, land and housing.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. If foreign investors could just come in and buy up all the land, no limits, it could lead to some pretty unintended consequences.
Yeah, like prices going way up and then locals being priced out of their own market.
Exactly. We've seen that happen in other places where, there's this sudden influx of investment.
Yeah, it creates this like affordability crisis for the people who actually live and work there.
Right. So Thailand's approach, it's really about, maintaining this balance.
Right.
They want to make sure the land stays accessible and affordable for their citizens.
It's not just about like pure profit.
No.
It's about like broader economic stability and social well-being.
Absolutely. And all of that, all of those restrictions, they actually do have an impact on property prices in Thailand.
Oh, interesting. So how so?
Well, one of the key effects is stability. The laws really help prevent those sudden spikes that you see in other property markets.
So it creates a more predictable environment, both for buyers and sellers.
Exactly. And that stability, it also contributes to affordability. So locals actually benefit because they've got these more affordable options compared to some of those global hotspots.
Right, where it's like driven up by those foreign investors.
Exactly.
That's a huge advantage.
It is.
Especially if you're trying to like get on the property ladder, right? It's not just about keeping prices, from going crazy. It's about making sure the market itself stays healthy.
Yeah, and it keeps that supply from getting too high, which could cause things to stagnate.
Right.
You don't want prices to start going down.
Right. So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
It is.
Where you're encouraging investment, but you're also protecting Thai citizens, and you're looking out for the health of the market overall.
Absolutely.
Okay. So even though these laws have been in place for a while now, could things change? Could we see some shifts in the future?
Well, I mean, given everything that's been happening globally, especially with the pandemic, it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
The pandemic, it forced a lot of countries, Thailand included, to really rethink some of those economic policies.
Yeah, absolutely. So Thailand's, they're looking for ways to attract investment, to stimulate growth, but they want to do it responsibly.
Right. It's got to be sustainable. It's that balancing act again.
Yeah, totally. So what are like some of the things that are being talked about? What could the future hold for foreign property ownership in Thailand?
Well, like we mentioned before, there's this growing talk about potentially increasing that foreign ownership quota for condos.
Okay.
Right now, remember, it's at 49%. So at least 51% of the units in any building, they've got to be owned by Thai nationals.
Right.
But some people are saying, hey, what if we bump that up, maybe to 70 or even 80%?
Wow.
It would be huge. It would really open up the market.
Yeah, it would make it a lot more attractive for foreign investors, right?
Yeah, if they can own a bigger piece of the pie. But this is all still very much in the discussion phase. It's not a done deal. There are a lot of things to consider, and they want to make sure that, whatever changes they make, they don't backfire.
Right. You got to be careful with those unintended consequences. It's about like finding that sweet spot.
Right.
Attracting the investment, but also making sure that you're protecting Thai citizens.
Right.
And that the market remains healthy.
Right.
Now, We also talked about land lease terms for foreigners.
Yes.
Right now, those are capped at 30 years. Do you think we could see that change?
Well, there's been some talk about extending that to 99 years.
Wow, that's like basically a century.
Yeah, it would be a big shift. It would make those long-term investments a lot more appealing.
Especially if you're like, looking to retire in Thailand or you want to spend a significant portion of your life there.
Absolutely, because that 99 years, that offers a much stronger sense of uh, stability. Like, you're not just there for a short little visit.
Right, right.
You're really putting down roots.
So it sounds like those two things, the condo quotas and those lease terms, those are the key areas to watch in the coming years.
Yeah, definitely. If those change, it could really reshape the Thai property market. It would be really interesting to see what happens.
It would be. Now, before we move on, I know there's so many misconceptions out there about this whole process. Are there any like big ones that you hear over and over again that you just want to like set the record straight on?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest ones is this idea that buying property in Thailand is just like this crazy risky process. Like you're going to get lost in all the legal jargon and there are all these traps waiting to catch you.
Right, because the laws are different and there are restrictions. It's natural for people to feel a little bit, overwhelmed or intimidated by the whole thing.
Yeah, and I totally get that. But honestly, it's not as complicated as people make it out to be. The confusion usually comes from just like not understanding the specific laws
Right,
and how they apply to the different types of property.
right. So it really comes down to doing your homework,
Yeah,
making sure you're getting your information from good sources.
absolutely. Like take the example of land ownership. Foreigners, we can't directly own land, but we can own condos.
Right.
As long as we stay within that, that 49% foreign ownership quota,
Yeah.
it's not about being shut out. It's about knowing the rules.
And that's where having someone, knowledgeable to guide you, like Ocean Worldwide, it can be, super helpful.
Totally.
They can walk you through the options, help you figure out what makes sense for your situation.
Definitely. And another misconception is that prices are just, skyrocketing, completely out of control because of all the foreign investment.
Yeah, this whole narrative that foreigners are coming in and like ruining it for everybody else.
Exactly, exactly. But it's important to remember that the Thai government, they've actually got these measures in place
Yeah.
to control those prices and make sure that the market is stable.
Right. So they're taking steps to prevent those wild price swings that we see in other parts of the world.
Exactly. And that actually benefits everybody. It protects the Thai economy, it makes sure that locals aren't being priced out, and it creates a much more stable, predictable environment for everybody.
Right. It's about making sure that the system is fair and that everybody has a chance to participate.
Absolutely.
Now, this next one, I feel like we have to address it because it comes up all the time.
Mhm.
That whole thing about needing a Thai partner to own property in Thailand.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. This idea that you, need a Thai spouse or a Thai business partner if you want to have any chance of success.
Right. Right. Like it's like this unspoken rule.
Yeah, but it's just not true. I mean, while having a Thai partner might simplify certain things, it's not a legal requirement.
Okay.
There are other ways for foreigners to invest.
So you're saying there are other paths available.
Absolutely. Like, remember all those alternative structures we discussed?
Right, yeah.
Leaseholds, usufructs, superficies, setting up a Thai company. These are all legal options that are available to foreigners, even if they don't have a Thai partner.
So those allow foreigners to get involved without needing to find, a Thai spouse or a Thai business partner.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So the takeaway is, while Thailand does have its specific rules, it's not a completely closed-off market for us.
Right. It's about understanding how the system works,
Yeah.
doing your homework, getting good advice when you need it.
Absolutely. And remember, Thailand has a lot to offer.
Yeah.
From those beautiful beach condos to those charming homes in the countryside.
Yeah.
It's a stunning country with a lot to offer.
It is.
And owning a piece of it, it's definitely achievable. You just got to go about it the right way.
All right. So we've covered so much in this deep dive already. We've talked about the specifics of the laws, we've busted some myths, and we've even looked at what the future might hold. But now I want to really shift gears for a second.
Okay.
And get into something a little bit more hypothetical.
I like it.
Let's do a thought experiment.
Okay, let's do it. What are we thinking?
What if Thailand just decided, you know what? We're opening up land ownership to foreigners. No restrictions, no quotas, no special requirements, just completely free and open access. What do you think would happen?
That is a fascinating question. I mean, it's a question that economists and real estate experts have debated for a long time.
Mm.
And there's no easy answer, right?
Right.
On the one hand, you could argue that it would lead to this huge influx of foreign investment. It would be this big boost for the Thai economy, create new opportunities, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it would remove all those barriers we've been talking about.
Exactly, exactly. But then you also have to think about the potential downsides.
Okay, what are some of those?
One of the biggest worries is what would happen to property prices. If you suddenly have all these foreign buyers coming in with, a lot of money, it could drive those prices way up. And then what happens to locals? They could be priced out of their own market.
Yeah, it's that like classic supply and demand
Yeah,
thing. If
right.
demand goes up but supply stays the same,
Yeah,
prices are going to go up.
yeah.
And that can create, a lot of problems, not just for individuals, but for the economy as a whole.
Absolutely. And then there's the cultural impact to consider. Land ownership, it's not just about economics. It's also about, um, you know, cultural values and traditions.
Yeah, it's tied to like people's sense of identity,
Yeah.
their connection to the land.
Exactly, exactly. So if you start seeing these big shifts in ownership patterns, you could end up with, a loss of that local character.
Right, right. So it's this balancing act.
Right.
On one side, you've got the potential for, economic growth, development, all those things. But then you've also got to protect, the cultural heritage, make sure that the local communities are benefiting. It's not a simple equation.
It's a very complex issue. There are no easy answers. And it's something that, Thai policymakers are really wrestling with as they think about the future.
Yeah. So even though it's just a thought experiment, it really highlights some of the key things to think about, the trade-offs, the potential consequences. It's a reminder that it's not just about the money, it's about the bigger picture.
It is, absolutely. It's about the economic, the social, and the cultural implications. You got to think about all of it.
And there's no like one right answer.
Yeah.
Every country's got to figure out what works best for them.
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked about the laws as they stand right now, the potential for them to change, kind of the economic logic behind all of these restrictions on foreigners owning land.
Hmm.
But now I want to kind of do a thought experiment.
Okay, a little what if.
This scenario. Exactly.
Yeah.
What if Thailand just said, you know what, forget all these restrictions, forget the quotas, the special requirements, everything. We're just going to completely open up land ownership to foreigners. Like anybody can come in and buy whatever they want. What do you think would happen?
It's a really interesting question to think about. And to be honest, it's one that, people who study economics, real estate experts, they've been debating this for years.
Yeah.
And there's no, easy answer. It's not black and white.
Right.
On the one hand, you could definitely argue that it would lead to this, huge surge in foreign investment.
Yeah.
Right. Which could be a really good thing for the Thai economy.
Yeah.
Create jobs, new opportunities, all that.
Right. It would just remove all the barriers that we've been talking about.
Exactly.
Make Thailand a much more attractive place to put your money.
Exactly. Exactly. But then, on the flip side, you got to think about those potential downsides.
Okay, so what are we talking about? What are some of the risks?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is, what would happen to property prices? Because if you suddenly have all these foreign buyers with a lot of buying power, it could cause prices to, skyrocket. And then what happens to the people who already live there? Thai citizens could get priced out of their own market.
Right, because it's basic supply and demand, right?
Exactly.
If the demand goes way up, but the supply stays the same, prices are going to go up. And that can create all sorts of problems, not just for individuals, but, for the overall economy.
It can, absolutely. And then there's the cultural side of things to consider because, owning land, it's not just an economic transaction. It's also about, culture and tradition.
Yeah, it's about people's sense of place, their connection to the land, their heritage. It's much bigger than just who owns what on paper.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, if you start seeing these big shifts in land ownership patterns, you could see a change in the character of different places.
Mm-hmm.
It could start to feel less like Thailand and more like, somewhere else.
Right. It's a really delicate balance.
It is.
On one side, you've got this potential for economic growth, which is great. But then on the other side, you've got to protect, the cultural heritage. You want to make sure that the local communities benefit. So it's a really complicated equation.
It is, yeah. There's no easy answer. And it's something that, the policymakers in Thailand, they're really thinking hard about this as they, make decisions about the future.
Yeah, for sure. So even if, this is all just a thought experiment,
Hmm.
it's still a really useful way to think about these issues.
Definitely.
Right. It shows us that these decisions have consequences. They have trade-offs. It's not just about, opening everything up and hoping for the best.
Right.
You got to think it through. And it's a reminder that, foreign investment, it has its place, but it can't come at the expense of, the people and the culture of the country.
It's all about finding that balance.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot where everybody benefits. Well, this has been a really, really interesting deep dive.
It
I feel
has.
like we've really explored all the angles of Thai property ownership.
We have, from the current laws to, what might happen in the future.
And we even got to play around with some what-if scenarios.
Always fun to speculate a little bit.
Exactly. But I think the big takeaway for our listeners, whether you're, a seasoned investor or you're just starting to, dip your toes in these waters, is knowledge is power. The more you understand about how things work in Thailand, the better prepared you'll be to make good decisions.
Definitely. And don't forget, we've got those amazing resources from Ocean Worldwide.
Yep.
They've been helping people navigate this market for years, especially in those beautiful places like, Phuket. Remember, it's Phuket, not.
Not Phuket.
Exactly. And Koh Samui.
Beautiful places. So if you're looking for some guidance, someone to hold your hand through the process, they're definitely a great resource.
They are.
So, as you think about your next move, your next investment, just remember to do your homework.
Right.
Be strategic, be thoughtful, and understand both the opportunities and the challenges that come with investing in a place like Thailand.
And who knows, maybe we'll see you on a beach in Thailand someday soon.
Maybe we'll be neighbors.
Exactly. Until then, happy exploring.
Thanks for listening, everybody.